Hi, it's Marc Mawhinney, and Natural Born Coaches is sponsored exclusively by BusinessCoachFunding.com. BusinessCoachFunding.com helps secure funding for business coaches or the clients of business coaches with no upfront fees. They aren't a bank, and they are a great resource for business coaches. To pre-qualify without a consultation, head over to BusinessCoachFunding.com. That's BusinessCoachFunding.com.
Welcome to the Natural Born Coaches podcast, the place where smart coaches come to grow their businesses. Ready to take your coaching to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Marc Mawhinney.
Hey coaches, welcome back to another episode of Natural Born Coaches, the podcast for your coaching business. I'm Marc Mawhinney. Today I've got an interesting guest on the show, someone who I've gotten to know really well here the last year or two, and he is the founder of Cold Start Technologies. His name is Jason Kanigan. And today we're going to chat about a lot of things, scaling, and some things need to be done before you scale, actually, which I think is important too. So pleased to have on the show today, Jason Kanigan. How are you doing, Jason?
Woohoo! Thanks, Marc. Appreciate the chance.
So before we begin, I know the story from you telling me, but can you tell us the story about how you came up with the name Cold Start Technologies? Because there's a lot of people listening who are in the process of naming their coaching businesses. So this could give them some insight and some inspiration.
So my long-term or medium-term goal is to get into the space field. And so I wanted a name that had something to do with science, space kind of feel, right? And there's two ways of figuring out a name for your business. I think I actually answered a question on Quora about this recently. The first is the brilliant insight flash, right? With previous business that worked for me, Sales on Fire, which is a sales training and coaching business. And I take all that and use that in the process part of what I do today. The second way is to do what I did, which is to come up with sort of a list of things. And it doesn't have to be a very long list. It could be 4 or 5 items that you want that name to reflect. And then just start dumping those kinds of terms into Google and seeing what comes up. Give yourself a time limit. Like I did this in an afternoon, so I spent 2 to 4 hours on it, right? And pulled a list of potential names and things that I liked and whatnot. And then at the end, and I do this with WordPress themes too, right? You could go forever searching for a name or the perfect WordPress theme or something like that. Set a time limit and do it, and then pick which one kind of ticks all the boxes. And so Cold Star for me was a sciencey term. It's a real thing. It's a star that is burning at a low temperature relative to other stars. And for me, first of all, it's a spacey, sciencey thing. The people in the industry recognize it instantly and go, oh, that's an awesome name when they hear it. So it's kind of like a pre-qualifier as well, right? It says, I am right. I have the right to be in this business just for the name. For me, it's about extracting all of the energy. Despite, maybe things aren't working perfectly, well, what can we do here to turn this thing around without spending $1 bazillion?
Okay. Did you ever hear the story about Napoleon Hill, how he came up with the name Think and Grow Rich?
I've probably read it, but I forget, so feel free.
Well, Napoleon Hill was procrastinating, or he just wasn't able to come up with this name of the book, and his publisher kept saying, we need a name, and they finally said, if you don't have a name to us by tomorrow morning, we're going to go with use your noodle to get the boodle. Because apparently, I'm not big on 1930s slang, but apparently boodle was a slang for money. So you're using your brain to get money. And the thought of that terrified Napoleon Hill, because he thought, I'll be a laughingstock with a book called Use Your Noodle to Get the Boodle. And he went to sleep, and it hit him overnight as he was sleeping, Think and Grow Rich. And of course, they went with that, and it became a huge, huge hit that's still huge today. So I have to think I probably wouldn't have read the book if it was an old 1930s personal development book called Use Your Noodle to Get the Boodle. But there's an idea. If anyone's stuck, maybe they can use that one. I don't think it's been used since then.
We're bringing the boodle back.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, everything comes back, like bell bottoms, everything else. Boodle. I'm going to start saying boodle a lot, and a lot of old like Depression era slang I'll start using. So your goal, you mentioned to get into the space industry. So if Elon Musk is listening to this, and maybe there's an opening at SpaceX or something for a coach or for someone that does what you do.
What would I want them to hire me for?
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I don't think Elon listens to the show. Not that I'm aware of.
Aw. I wasn't going to say anything, but.
Can you tell us exactly what you're doing? Because I know that you help businesses scale, and that's a big part of it. But as I hinted to when I was introducing you, there's more to scaling than just rolling out of bed this morning and say, hey, I'm going to scale my business.
Right.
There's very important steps beforehand. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Right. I really want to talk today about treating your coaching business seriously. I feel that is what your audience is going to get the most value from. But scaling, to me, I mean, it means so many different things to so many different people. And one of the challenges in finding a target market and getting that message figured out for this field is that you see, let me help you scale fast, being used by so many different kinds of coaches and trainers and that, right? And consultants. HR people will say the secret to scaling fast is to have principles for good hiring practices and use them. And then you can hire fast and that'll help you scale fast. And that's their magic bullet. Somebody else might say, oh, the secret to scaling fast is to really amp up your lead generation and get that lead count skyrocketing. And that's scaling fast. And me, with my process engineering hammer, looking for the nails to hit, will say, well, no, the secret to scaling fast is getting your processes figured out. It's really, it's all those things and it's none of those things and that. And those are the main skills that we use. But I really would like to talk about 3 systems that people need in place before they're able to scale.
Okay.
So, and I've been saying these things since 2012. They are not brand new things. However, in the groups that I'm in, especially on Facebook, we see this all the time, Mark. People who beg off from paying for coaching or help or whatever, but then suddenly they've got money to go on vacation, right? And you see the photos from Bermuda or whatever, right? You need these 3 systems in place before you can scale. Every business, whether you're selling dog walking for a living or some kind of high-end coaching, you need lead generation figured out. So traffic sources and the ability to pull in a certain number of leads a month, hopefully pre-qualified, and get them into your system. If you don't have that, you don't have a business. If that's inconsistent, you don't have a business. And every time you go into a new business or change it, you have to figure that out all over again. I had to figure it out with Cold Star. Not easy. The second system is conversion. It's like, great, I've got leads now. What do I do with them, right? I've got to qualify them, warm them up, and convert them into customers, some of them. If you don't have a system for that, things are going to be very haphazard for you as well. The third system that we need to concentrate on is fulfillment, which is how are you going to get the result that the person hired you for? And if you're a coach and you're doing this, figuring this out over and over again differently every time, you have obviously not systemized your fulfillment process, and that's going to kill the profitability of your business. So those are the 3 systems you need: lead gen, conversion, fulfillment. Got it.
And before we jump into dissecting each of those 3 things, I know you mentioned about coaches needing to take their businesses seriously, which I'm glad that you said that, because the danger with online is everybody's hearing everywhere, oh, it's easy, you can have the 4-hour work week and the dream lifestyle entrepreneurship, and you'd be laying by the pool and set it on autopilot and right out of the gate, which leads to a lot of people getting started and realizing, hey, it's not always that easy. But you tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing out in the coaching world. If you had to venture a guess and say X percentage of coaches are serious about their business, what percent would you tack on that?
Off the cuff, 1 in 5.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. That's 20% is a number I say as well. I use Pareto's principle for this as well. I think that just like 20% of coaches are making 80% of the revenue, I think 20% of coaches are serious and 80% are not saying they're bad people, but aren't taking it seriously enough.
Right. And in a lot of cases, like you say, they've been sold that dream, and therefore they don't really understand that they need to work at this and get those 3 systems up and running.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So when it comes to lead gen, are you more of a paid ads guy? Are you organic, or is it a hybrid?
I've done both over the years,
Yep.
and I have to be clear, I am not a lead generation expert. I'm a conversion guy. So I really know a lot about that second system. For the first system, I know it's a weakness for me, and I go hire it out usually.
Okay.
In the past, I mean, when I got started online with sales coaching long ago and far away, in the 2011, 2012 era, I was able to use a lot of organic lead generation. But the difference between me and everybody else, and why I was able to dominate this particular platform at the time, was I went in there and I spent 3 months of evenings just interacting with that target market. So not trying to shove any product or service at them, just discovering what were they good at, what were they bad at, what did they say that they needed, what did they really need. And I was supporting myself by doing copywriting projects.
So how are you interacting? Was it?
Oh, it was a forum. It was a forum, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a forum.
And online forums, are they still alive? There's some people who say they're dead, but I've heard people who still in 2019 are using them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a target market there. There's a couple I still participate on, but generally it's just to participate, to give back, to keep fresh on it. I find the newbie-ishness of them has really increased.
Oh, okay.
The last 3 or 4 years.
So you were in there a couple hours a night. When you say interacting, you weren't spamming the walls of the forum. You were actually answering questions and showing that you know what you're talking about and having conversations with people like they're actual people. It's a crazy concept.
Shocking.
But when you look at people as people and not as a lead or a number, then that tends to go better. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? How did that interaction go with that target market?
Sure. Well, I mean, I could have done a whole bunch of things back then. This is 6 years ago. I could have opened up a business that does what I do today, right? Process and data control, operations management. I could have done copywriting there. I could have focused on sales training, and I could have done web design, for example. I could have done all these things. And I had just recently, in the last 2 years, moved to the United States and had to wait to get my citizenship and the right to work, or not citizenship, permanent residency approval. So, and that took the better part of a year to kind of get that going. So, it was really like starting over. What happened is, through the active interacting, the people who already knew what they were talking about got to see me as a fellow expert and get some respect going there. I discovered that there was room for consultative sales training, a specific kind of sales training, which they didn't have an expert of there at that forum. It was a good spot. There was a lot of interaction at the time. That's what I did. And by the time that 3-month period was over, there was so much pent-up demand for a product or a service from me that when I finally did release something, it went crazy.
Yeah, you were feeding a starving crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay. That's interesting. I'm glad that you mentioned that about the lead gen part of it. And I'm glad you mentioned forums, because people do write forums off. I heard about a copywriter getting business from Reddit, which I'm not a huge Reddit guy, but yeah, he actually gets business from Reddit. So
if people are there, if people are on a platform and they're talking, I mean, that's an advantage right there, right? Just having them there. And then you can qualify in further to see, do they have a problem that I can solve? Do they typically have a problem that I can solve here? If not, you probably should spend your time elsewhere. But what if they do, right? Then it's a game of positioning at that point and having a consistent process.
Got it. Now, you're a big conversion guy, and conversion makes a big difference, because you could get 100 leads a day. If you're not converting any of them, you're going to, well, first of all, get burnt out, but that's not, that doesn't make a successful business. So can you tell us a little bit more about your conversion practice and what you recommend people use?
What people use? Well, that depends on what your offer is. I tend to go with the lower ticket offers, which for me is under $500, $1,000. You should be able to sell those online without human interaction.
Right.
Anything higher than that, it's okay if it starts requiring a human being to do. However, it's not required. I managed a launch for somebody with a stock trading software far away from the internet marketing world some years back. And we made $600,000 on a $2,000 product in a week. Was
that directing people to a call, or was that just one where they whip out their credit card?
That was webinar funnel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that's a magic number I've heard now, unless it's changed. But I've heard that up to $2,000 you could probably get away with without a call. But anything that's higher ticket, $5,000, $10,000 or whatever, then that's probably going to require a call with the person or with someone on their team.
It probably is. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think that comes down to who's your target market.
Right.
If you've got a very specific niche, the demographic of people who are affluent, who are used to spending money, who think of $5,000 as $500.
Yes.
Right? It's always money. It's always money to them. But if their money tolerance is which is when I say how much is a lot of money.
If they're blowing their noses with $100 bills, it's not really, or wiping their bums.
Well, if they're just used to it, right? If they're used to putting $100,000 into an automobile.
Yes.
Right.
And it also probably depends on the person selling it. So Tony Robbins, Brendan Bouchard, people like that with big name recognition open up a one-on-one coaching program. They're not going to need a heavy sell because people have been following them for years. They know who they are. If you just started in your niche today, that's a different story. Right.
Now, as far as sales calls, sales conversations go, you do want some qualification. Right, you do want a warm-up process that gets them ready for a call, and that could be a webinar or a series of short videos, some emails, and that kind of thing. I did, in the last year and a half, get involved with a startup with a good guy named Jeremy Pope. We co-founded a business called The Closing Engine, and that's a third-party sales as a service business. That's what we provided, and The Closing Engine is there. It's bigger than ever. I just congratulated him yesterday for growing it to 13 people. It was 9 when I left.
Yeah.
So he's, and that was like 4 months ago. So he's done very well in my absence. And so people could go talk to him if they want to scale their business and have somebody else taking those sales calls. That's an important part of conversion, is getting a good expert in sales.
I think he should get a poster done up like Obama's one when he was running for president, except he call it Pope and Change. If you picture Jeremy there. I'm going to reach out to him about that.
Yeah. We've got the graphic artists to do it.
But there we go. Yeah. So that one's grown. And so sometimes you're going in with people and you're partnering with them on this, and then you slide out once they're rolling and they're good on their own. Right. Okay. Got it. Your actual call now, if you're doing a sales call with someone, can you tell us more about that? How long is the call? What kind of things are you touching on during the call?
Oh, if a call goes beyond an hour, there's probably some kind of problem. The call is not to convince you as the buyer. Right? I'm not there to hammer you into submission. I'm there to uncover. There are 3 factors in selling in the way that I teach it anyway: need, budget, and personality fit. We should have a pretty good idea before we get on the phone whether those things are there or not, especially the first 2. Do they have a need for what I have to offer? Do they have a problem that I can solve? If they don't, why are we talking? Right? They don't get to talk to me if that's the case. Budget is not, do they have some money in their jeans? It's, do they have a problem that is large enough to warrant my involvement? Somebody in another group yesterday was posting, she's a group owner, and she was saying, what can people get from you for $50, $100, $200? And I said, nothing. Because those fees do not support the size of the problem nor the level of expertise that I bring to the table.
Does she need actual direct services or
sale prices? Online? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Not just like ebooks or online programs.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that tells you I don't spend a lot of time in that group. I love those people.
And what group is it? No, I'm just kidding. But I'm glad you mentioned it, the longer calls. I was talking with someone, a client of mine yesterday about this, who is in the habit of doing longer discovery calls. And I said, look, when you're getting into the longer calls, my calls are only 30 minutes max, and a lot of them are done in 20 minutes. When you get up to an hour and a half or so, they can very easily veer into brain picking territory where you're just getting your brains picked. It's open season. And then the person, they appreciate it, but they think, well, I figure I got enough from Jason now, so I'll go figure out the rest myself.
Right. Yeah. So they think they can patchwork it together in this Frankenstein monster.
Yes.
Technology. And that does not work, people. That doesn't work. You cannot get the free stuff and hope to cobble it together.
Right. Or if you're talking to 20 different people, and I've seen this too, where somebody will go on 20 different free calls with other people and then try to cobble together, like you said, like Frankenstein, and hope that it works. It's really difficult to do that. So, okay. So your calls are max an hour and you're not heavy selling or anything like that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're talking about on those calls?
What I want to uncover is the hidden reason about why they want to go forward with this. Sales training is a huge topic. We could talk about it for hours and hours. And I've been on, 100 different podcasts about sales training over the last bunch of years. But that's the main thing that I'm looking for.
So let's say we have a call and I say, Jason, thank you very much, even though I'm not married at the moment. I got to talk it over with the wife. So I'll get back to you.
Okay. Well, that's a tactic, and that should have been covered before we got on the phone.
Okay.
Is uncovering hidden decision makers or influencers.
Yes. Make sure they can actually make a decision on that call, not have to talk it over with someone else. Okay.
Yeah. And have that person on the call. That's totally fine. So I would write a line or two in the email copy before the booking page.
Okay.
And say, a lot of people want or have somebody that they at least bounce ideas off of. Thing is, if they're not on the call, I can't address issues that they have. There's a thing called the DISC profile, Mark, which you might have run into. Yeah. It divides society into 4 different types for those listening. D's, I's, S's, and C's. And each one of those types, I like DISC, even though I can teach others, because it's easy to remember. It's just 4 types. But each one of those types wants something different, or they have a different measure or grading system. And you need to feed different information to that person. So while you may have, if you get one prospect on the phone, but they've got to take it to the other for a decision, you may not have given them the ammunition to help sell the other person. All right? They're going to be missing on something. So it's important to get both of them on the phone.
Right.
Get them to be able to ask questions.
So I'm guessing with your model, you're not heavy on follow-up because you're taking the steps before the call that there's a very good chance that they're going to be a definite yes or or a no, and you're not chasing them with soft maybes. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you.
Right. That's an essential part of the Sales on Fire program, which has been selling for 6 years. That a yes is fine, a no is fine, which is a surprise to a lot of people. But a think it over is not acceptable because I'm not chasing you around the room. And I know there's all that hardcore selling, the money's in the follow-up and that may be true for some industries and that. But if you've done a good job of qualifying your prospect, which is a weak area for many people, if you've done a good job of qualifying, the sale is just going to be a confirmation. It's not going to be this big wrestling match.
Yes. No, and when I started my coaching business coming from a real estate background, I said to myself, I don't want to chase people because real estate, that's what it was. It was follow up with them. They may not be ready to sell their home and checking with them once a month or every couple months for some of them were 5 or 10 years by the time they were ready to come with me. And I said, I am not doing that with coaching. I'm getting too old for this. So I don't do that with the coaching side. So let's touch on fulfillment, Jason, because that's the third piece of the pie here.
Right.
When we're talking about fulfillment, can you explain a little bit more? A lot of people listening to this show are solopreneurs, or they might have a VA, but they're probably doing their coaching business themselves. Is it possible to build a huge business by yourself?
Probably not. What I would recommend in that case, if you do want to keep the business small, is you got to raise your fees incrementally, right? With every iteration. You've got to raise your fees until the market says, no, we're not going to pay any more than that. But this has got to do with positioning and authority and how well you do your lead gen and your qualifying. So all those factors bundle in. Fulfillment, a lot of us are really bad users of our time, right? I was quoted in Inc. magazine several years back about productivity. And this is one of the major things about fulfillment that will help a lot of coaches is you have to actually write things down. Do not fly by the seat of your pants and make it up every time. A lot of solopreneur coaches are doing that. And I know years and years ago when I used to do sales coaching calls, I did a fair amount of that particularly if it was a one-on-one session where we had done all the sort of information transfer, because I used to have kind of a performance section.
Right.
Where I do 2 hours of intellectual property transfer, essentially, teaching them about selling and this way of selling and that. But then anything after that was really ad-libbed, and it was not a good use of my time. So write down, systemize what you do and how you do it. Okay, people come in, there's an intake system, and the more you do this, the more it can be automated. Instead of making it up and asking them, okay, Mark, what's your email address? Okay, Mark, what time is a good time to meet? Okay, when should I have my times open for people to talk to me? Should I leave my schedule wide open, or should I limit it so that they can't bombard me and take over my time? I used to think back in the 2012, 2013 era that if my calendar was full wall to wall with meetings and activities and talking to people and that I was doing well. And that just leads to burnout.
Yes.
So people have got to get control over their calendar. And a major way of doing that is systemizing the fulfillment of their business.
Right. So if there's something that constantly pops up with every single client and you're having to go over it, then it's probably a good idea to record a video or something, and then you could direct people over to it rather than you going over it 50 times with 50 different people.
Right. And people like that stuff. It gives them more confidence. It shows them, oh, Mark must have done this more than once, right? Not just doing this and making it up on the fly for me.
Got it. Okay. So that's a big part of fulfillment is systematize or automatize. Is that a word? Automate.
Automating.
Yeah, I've just created a new word today, automatize. I'm going to go grab the domain. Automate it and make sure that it's not something, because that happens in my business too. There's things that I've gone over with every single client that I have now recorded so I can Dropbox it to them or send them over to an unpublished YouTube link, because I'm like, man, if I go over this one more time, I'm going to poke my eyes out here. Even though it's their first time seeing it.
Exactly. It's like you don't want to get mad at them.
Yeah.
Because it is the first time they're asking the question, and it's a legit question. But for you, it is the 50,000th time that you've been asked.
Right. So is there, for coaches, a right or wrong answer for how long you should probably work with people? I know that goes a whole gamut. Some people say, well, I can get everything done in a single session, which doesn't seem to be the best way to build the business, because you're constantly needing new clients. But then you have others on the other end of the spectrum that say, hey, I work with clients for life, and you have to cut our hands and do a blood handshake and everything. We're connected for life. Any thoughts on that?
I don't know if there is a one-size-fits-all right answer here. You do want some continuity going on, and I think this has to do with a deeper problem of not understanding the laddering potential of the business. Right? It's just most coaches come in and they're like, okay, I fixed this problem, but they really have not written it down, mapped it out of, okay, my typical or ideal client starts at this point, A, right? And if they're not at A, they're not a fit to work with me. This goes back to that qualification thing, right?
Right.
In an earlier system. And then I take them to another specific point, which is B. And that period in there is how long do you work with them, right? And then thinking about laddering is, okay, well, what happens after B? And that is something that I know a lot of coaches really have not considered. They're so tied up in the mushiness and their lack of understanding of A to B. If they could get that figured out, clarity on that, systemize that, then that would free their minds up to figure out, okay, what can I do to continue my relationship with this client and get more billable hours or move them into a membership site or do something else with them.
Got it. So Jason, as we're nearing the end of our time here, can you tell people where they can find out more about you? What are you working on now that we'd be keen to hear about?
Okay, so we've talked a lot today about what to do before you scale. You need these 3 systems in place: lead gen, conversion, and fulfillment. I also recommend a good book that just came out recently from Cameron Herold called Vivid Vision. I think a lot of coaches could use that book and treat it seriously. It's a business. One of the best places to start learning more about what I do and how I help businesses is to go to, I have my own podcast. You were a guest on it. So y'all can listen to Marc early on as a guest on the Cold Star Project. Cold Star Project is what you can search for, and that has its own domain. It's also on 8 or 9 different platforms, all the main ones, the iTunes and many, many others.
Cool.
That's a good place to listen to. And if they want to look at services, they can look at coldstartech.com, which is more just about kind of a flavor and being able to book a call to talk with me at this point.
Got it. Okay. Well, Jason, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you coming on the show, and kudos for everything you're doing. I've been watching your growth here, and it's cool to see. No pun intended. Cool, cold, Thanks for coming on the show.
You bet. Appreciate the chance.
So we've had Jason Kanigan on the show today. Go check out Cold Star Technologies. I'm Marc Mawhinney, and I will see you next time on Natural Born Coaches.
Thanks for listening to the Natural Born Coaches podcast at naturalborncoaches.com. See you next time.
This episode was brought to you by our exclusive sponsor, businesscoachfunding.com. If you're a business coach who needs funding or you have clients who need it, businesscoachfunding.com can help. Check them out, and we'll see you on the next episode.